President. Point of order, I request a quorum count.
During lunch today, I suspended the meeting, and I had very detailed communication with different parties and affiliations. I told them if the different parties could come to an agreement on the arrangements on this debate, I would be happy to adjust the arrangements according to the agreement. But after lengthy discussions, members of different parties and affiliations could not reach a consensus on the arrangement for this debate. I therefore decide to go by my original ruling and to tackle this debate. Mr. Paul Chair, just now it was a chaos. I could not start reading the speech. I now would continue to speak on the CROP meeting. Just now I was reading Mr. Alvin YEUNG, President. In accordance with ROP 91, I'd like to suspend ROP 39 so members could speak for more than once. This is because, Mr. President, on Monday, you made formal arrangements for the format of this debate. We could not move this motion by giving 12 days of notice, and procedurally we could not have taken it to the House Committee. I would ask the President to consider giving an exemption. Under Rule 91, there should be a notice period, and at this stage, I would not give any exemption for members to suspend Rule 91. Since given the voluminous amendments that have to be examined and no precedence of individual members giving notice to move proposed resolutions to amend ROP at a council meeting even before or parallel to CROP's processing of such proposed amendments, CROP has decided under the extraordinary circumstances to examine whether a proposed amendment appears not to have any constitutional or legal implications. And there is, Mr. Paul Chair, please stop, Mr. Ray Chan. Members, order, please. Just now I suspended the meeting for 2.5 hours, and we had discussions in my room. We discussed everything. I shall not allow more points of order in order to have a debate on my ruling unless there are new issues. Mr. Dennis Kwok. Mr. Dennis Kwok, President, in accordance with ROP 91, I move to suspend ROP 34(3) and 44. Even if you have jointly put the 12 resolutions together. However, I would suggest that we separate the debate into different sessions in accordance with Article 75 of the Basic Law, that we should be able to debate on each resolution separately. I already said that I shall not allow members to move motions under Rule 91 without giving notice. This is against my ruling. This is also not in order. I hope members will not waste time. There is a consensus among CROP members present at meeting that the proposed amendment should be made and subject to the views of the committee. Where there is a preliminary satisfied that a proposed amendment meets these requirements and subject to the views of the House Committee, the Chairman will move a proposed resolution seeking approval for effecting the proposed amendment to ROP at a Council meeting. Otherwise, CROP will not proceed with the proposed amendment, and it will be up to the original proponent to consider whether he/she will proceed in his/her individual capacity to give notice of the proposed amendment and to seek the Council's approval on the proposed amendment. After discussion, the CROP decided that we should only come to a consensus on Mr. Charles Mok's proposals to replace the Chinese character 舉 by 舉 in Rules 1, 4, 12, 13, 14, 15. There are altogether 35 rules in ROP that contain a total of 145 references to the Chinese character 舉. And I will try to speak amidst this chaos, and I will now speak on my own views. Why do we have amendments to ROP? It is because within this term, we have studied into different ROPs, and the Secretariat and the Legal Services Division have been discussing how we could tackle filibustering and quorum counts. We also had legal advice on different occasions, and at this stage, allow me, Mr. President, to talk about the present situation. On the face of it, if you have a point of order, please do not bang on the table. This is not a zoo. It is said that filibustering should be a right. However, in other parliaments and congresses, now how filibuster is allowed, it is when there are important resolutions or motions. If you want to have time and room to draw the public's attention to these issues, then you can do it. But today, the non-establishment camp are staging very violent filibustering, like Taliban's filibustering. They flout all the ROP. This is unbearable. And in the circumstance, President, point of order. In the circumstance, please, members, go back to your seats. What do you want? You moved your fist first. Members, please go back to your seat. I will allow Mr. Paul Chair to finish, and I will handle the points of order. Mr. President, this is a time when we cannot bear this or bear with this anymore, because there is arbitrary filibustering all the time. It is like Taliban's filibustering. It always happens. It's quite blind. Someone might do it for the sake of his own sector. It's just like the arrangements for the medical council composition. Many people say if we allow filibustering, then we can have more monitoring of the administration. But this is totally wrong, because they are only crying wolf. Mr. Paul Chair, please stop. Please stop, Mr. Paul Chair. You are not keeping order. How can I conduct the meeting? Sit down. Please sit down. Members, please return to your seats. Members, Members, please return to your seats and sit down.
請你坐低。
Please sit down.
譚文豪議員，
Mr. Jeremy Tam, President. I understand you want to handle points of order. So do I. Under 39A of the Rules of Procedure, a member shall not interrupt any other member except by rising to a point of order. If you only respect other rules but not this one, I think it's problematic. I have been standing. I have been showing to you I needed to speak, but you glossed over 39A. You should have stopped Mr. Paul Chair in order for me to raise a point of order, but you did not. I think it is a big problem. What is the point of order you want to raise? President. Mr. Paul Chair is interrupting me. Please control his emotions for him because he cannot control himself. Mr. President, he is interrupting. He is not speaking to speak. You also like to interrupt, but I am speaking to you, President. Please raise your point of order. President, you need to be fair. I rise to speak on the ROP, but Mr. Paul Chair is not standing. He is not speaking on ROP, but he is shouting. You don't control him, but you say I'm wrong. Mr. Jeremy Tam, I'm asking you to raise your point of order. Members, order please. Allow Mr. Jeremy Tam to speak. You should ask Mr. Paul Chair to keep order first. Ms. Claudia Mo is also shouting. That is why I'm asking all members to keep order. Mr. President, I hope what is your point of order? Please raise it directly. I am going to raise 2 points of order. Number 139A. I have been standing for so long, but you disregarded me. So 39A is a point of order. Did you follow the rules of procedure? You are going to raise a point of order according to 39A. I did not have the chance to. I was just standing. Now please go directly to your point of order. I am also raising this as a point of order. I was saying I would like to raise 2 points of order. Number 1, 39A. Why is it that when a member has risen to raise a point of order, but you did not handle it immediately? This is the first one. This side of members have been very noisy. I could not concentrate on that point. It's all right, President. You said that whatever we say here needed not be facts, including what the President says. So I'd like to draw your attention to 39A. I'm just following the rules of procedure. Number 2, I'd like to refer to Rule 91. You said that you would not accept it because you would require some notice to be given, but you only decided on Monday. So there was no time, and that is why the ROP allowed you to give an exemption and approve a discussion. So, Mr. President, citing the original intent of 91, this could be done with the consent of the President. This is because only on Monday we knew of your ruling. And also, please strictly enforce 39A. When a member rises, please allow him to speak. I also hope that members will adhere strictly to the ROP. When the Council is in session, please keep quiet. I will say again, at this stage, I shall not consider approving members resorting to 91 of the rules of procedure without notice. I'm saying this for the 3rd time, and I hope members will not abuse the ROP. Mr. Paul Chair. Mr. President, there are many amendments, but frankly speaking, what is controversial, if there was to be a meaningful debate. Mr. Paul Chair, please stop. Mr. Ted Hui, thank you. Councillor Leung, please don't be so biased when you act as the referee. You are always favoring the pro-establishment camp, and you don't allow people to speak on the ROP. You are being watched by the public. You are unfair as a referee. I'm aware that you did not allow the pro-democratic camp to move certain amendments, those from Wu Chi-wai, Mr. James Doe, etc. For example, 14(4), you explained that this would not be consistent with the basic law. Mr. President, can you hear me out? No, you are rising to raise a point of order. My ruling shall be final. I'm not debating you. I'm questioning why you are favoring the pro-establishment camp. This is a point of order. Please sit down. But you have not heard me out. Please hear me out. Your ruling is that amendments to 14(4) were not consistent with the basic law and the ROP. Of course, the amendments would not be consistent with the original rules. If the amendment would be the same as the rules, why would we want to move any amendments? So what do you mean by inconsistency? Is it that if things are such that you don't like them, then they are inconsistent? Please explain your ruling. I have already said that my ruling shall be final. If you want me to explain, you can do so on another occasion, but not in council. That rule is very clear. Mr. Paul Chair, the main arguments have just to do with 2 or 3 points.
For certain areas, they merit discussion. For example, the issue of petitions. And this was from the 1858 standing orders from the governor. Anyone whose legal rights might be jeopardized could file a petition, and this is the historical context. And according to the rules of procedure, there must be proper debates and motions at the Legislative Council before follow-up action is done. And as our parliament develops, we had new rules of procedure as well as new committee systems which could address such needs. For example, for bills, we have different bills committees, and for policy and other issues, we have different panels and subcommittees, and we also have the Public Accounts Committee to monitor public accounts. As for major areas, we can form select committees. That is why we no longer need the system of petitions. 20 years after the establishment of the SAR, since last year, it was first implemented in the case of Timothy Tong. So even without this system, the Legislative Council can still play its function, and there's a historical context. In 1968, we had 26 members at the Legislative Council. The threshold was 10 members, which was about 38%. By 1976, there were 42 members. 15 members could form a threshold at 39%. In 1983, Mr. Paul Chair. Mr. Paul Chair. President, I cite Rule 41(4). And Paul Chair said that the kind of filibustering by the opposition camp was a Taliban-style filibuster. You request a clarification. I do not need to respond at this point, and this is not insulting in nature. Please refer to the rules of procedure. Mr. Paul Chair. Mr. Roy Kwong feels that a Taliban-style filibustering is insulting to them. Can you clarify what you said? First of all, the phrase did not pinpoint any specific member. I was merely describing the action in general. It was not insulting. The speaker is not coming through.
謝偉邝俊宇議員
Mr. Roy Kwong, you raised your question already. Mr. Paul Chair, was the use of the phrase Taliban-style filibustering an insult? I was not being personal. This is not your turn to speak. Please be seated. Mr. Paul Chair. Today we have 70 members at the Legislative Council. Our threshold is 20 members. Ms. Eddie Chu. President, I request a ruling. I feel that I was insulted by Mr. Paul Chair. In what way do you think you were insulted? He used the word Taliban to describe the members from the Democratic camp. Mr. Paul Chair, did you use the word Taliban to describe the Democratic members? I used the word to describe the phenomenon. I wasn't being personal or specific to any members. The speaker is not coming through. Mr. Paul Chair was not being personal in his use of the word Taliban. Please do not speak without my permission. Mr. Paul Chair, please continue. The current threshold is 20 members out of 70, which is 28.6%, which is very low. And we want to increase the threshold to 35%, which would be relatively higher than the past. But as we said, we have different systems or channels in place to deal with. Currently, this is a backdoor used by members who could not achieve a majority, and they tell the public that this system must remain to take action against some unpopular figures such as Mr. C.Y. Leung or Mr. Timothy Tong. And to be frank, Mr. Andrew Wan was very honest, and he just want to vent his anger. And according to Mr. Jeremy Tam, he said we cannot let these people go. All these are acts conducted out of ignorance of political reality. Dr. Lena Wang, what is the point of order? President, I would like your ruling on this. Mr. Paul Chair said the word chiu in Cantonese. Was it vulgar or offensive language? And Mr. Andrew Wan did not say what Mr. Paul Chair. Mr. Paul Chair, and I just use a casual word. I'm not trying to dodge the problem. Well, if you want, I can show you what vulgar language sounds like. Please use parliamentary language in the Legislative Council. So please have some respect for each other, Mr. Paul Chair. I said we have to accept the political reality. Mr. Lai Chi-ying is alleged to. Mr. Paul Chair, please pause. Mr. Paul Chair was intimidating us with what he said. He said he would use vulgar language. Do you feel that it's all right? Mr. Paul Chair, another member said what you said was offensive and it's not fit for the Legislative Council. can you clarify whether you you were intentional? I try to use the I just try to sound more certain or to emphasize my point, and I said I could have used vulgar language, but it doesn't mean I will or do. Ms. Andrew Wan. Thank you, President. I've been standing for a long time. Paul Chair said I said the exclamation "Chiu" in Cantonese. I want him to clarify that I did not say as such. I clarify that it was a word added on by myself. I just want to help, bring his point across. The reality is that when we investigate Mr. Lai Chi-ying's political donations, we set up a committee, and there were 7 members, and the result of the vote was 3-3 because the chairman did not vote. And the members, please remain silent. This is the political reality. A lot of people want to reveal this scandal by Lai Chi-ying, and even this select committee failed to do anything. Dennis Kwok cited all the legal obstacles. President Paul Chair was sidetracked. Why didn't you stop him? Please continue, Mr. Paul Chair. I was just given an example. Reality is reality. Sometimes you cannot force things through. If you cannot resort to PNP, it doesn't mean you should abuse this system, which has a low threshold. You should not make such petitions. Mr. Paul Chair, please pause. I hope members would allow fellow members to complete what they say instead of constantly interrupting with point of order. Mr. Dennis Kwok, thank you for allowing me to raise a point of order. Mr. Paul Chair quoted what I said in the committee on the interests of members. We all signed non-disclosure agreements. We cannot disclose the information. Please make a ruling. Mr. Paul Chair, please clarify. I did not disclose any information at all. I only cited the reports from that committee, including motions moved by Mr. Dennis Kwok, and we could not obtain the conclusions that were true. I did not disclose anything. Please do not be oversensitive unless you have anything to hide. I've been interrupted at least 5 to 6 times already. I will say it again. A lot of members are trying to defend their bosses, including Mr. Lai Chi-ying, so we could not we could not obtain the conclusions we were due. We wanted to investigate Timothy Tong. We have our system. We have ICAC. We have the PAC and investigations by government departments. But still, some people resorted to backdoor methods, and some people had things to say about CY Leung. So they decided to make a petition, which is a backdoor approach. This is an abuse of the system we must tackle. Ms. Claudia Mo, please be silent. You have been talking non-stop. As we said, our threshold is too low. Apart from dealing with filibustering issues, Mr. Roy Kwong, for the sake of Mr. Paul Chair, according to 38(3), we request a clarification, and he said the pro-establishment members try to defend their bosses. I said non-establishment members. You know, if you have been listening carefully, please allow me to continue. Mr. Dennis Kwok, I hope you can rule on the point I mentioned. He said the Dennis Kwok raised a number of legal issues to as a delay tactic. I suspect that this claim, together with the claims that some members are defending their bosses, these might be in breach of the non-disclosure agreements, or this is gravely misleading. You can check the recording. In order to not to give the opposition any more excuses, I'm willing to withdraw what I said, but facts are facts. I will follow up with this afterwards. I will follow up with this when the time is ripe.
On the face of it, you may ask why we want to do this. First of all, the ratio of the number of members required to move this, to hand in this petition is too low, because it would allow people to do it through a back door and adding to the heavy workload of the Secretariat. That's why we would like to make suitable adjustment to this petition procedure. And I thank Mr. Martin Liu for moving this amendment, because this is, on the face of it, not related to filibuster, but it's more serious than a filibuster. In the heat of the moment, President, I might not have been able to explain why we have to deal with filibuster or the wastage of council time and resources. I understand that this is not going to be hurtful for all sides. But I hope Mr. Paul CHAN can clarify his point that that setting up a select committee by petition is tantamount to a filibuster. Mr. Paul CHAN said that earlier on, in respect of the select committee on C.Y. Leung, said he would like the select committee to be given all the powers under the powers and privileges in order to summon some documents, to ask for the presentation of some documents. Mr. Paul CHAN, would you like to clarify? Well, if we have to clarify what we have said, it would be impossible to make a speech. The relevant rule is for ambiguities and in a speech, then the member may be asked to clarify things. I don't think it's about asking members to clarify what he or she said some months ago. I hope, President, you will not allow other members to interrupt me anymore. Well, I've said that the amendments would hurt everyone. So for individual members, after the amendments are passed, the tools available or the powers available to individual members may be affected. I grant that. But if we do not do anything about the rules, even though this is going to be hurtful, if we avoid the issues, this council is not going to function anymore. So we are doing this for very good reasons. Let's hope that this determined procedure can return this council to normal. If we don't use this lethal weapon, we will have more casualties. So we have no other option but to move and pass the amendments. And I'll put a question to you, and that is the motion moved by Mr. Paul TSE be passed. Mr. Alvin YEUNG, I move my resolution, proposed resolution. There's no need for you to move your resolution now. In accordance with Article 75, I would like to amend Rule 3, Rule 79, and Rule 92. UNESCO and have advocated good practices for parliaments. In 2005, there is a handbook on good practice of parliaments, and there are 4 conditions to be met. First, the power, including the legislative power, the monitoring power, should be written into the Constitution and be protected. The composition must be able to represent different sectors of society and to reflect the pluralistic nature of community. And also there must be an environment for members to freely express their views. This has become the yardstick to judge whether a parliament or democracy is a good democracy and whether a parliament is democratic. And the other supplement subsequently. In 2012, there's a declaration on open parliament. An open parliament must promote transparency and access to information, and also there's the need to streamline access to parliamentary information. These are the conditions for parliament to be good, to be well established. If we judge our legislative council by these standards, we are lagging behind these international standards on the question of representativeness. Functional constituencies, are they representative? People have real doubts, of course. And now things are making a turn for the worse. The pro-establishment camp take advantage of a number of pan-democratic legislators having been disqualified and now try to move amendments to the rules of procedure. Is that going to be conducive for the Council to be more transparent and democratic? Of course, we not. There are 2 reasons for me to move this amendment. I wanted to stop the pro-establishment camp to move those undemocratic amendments. And now what we can, of course, but the President has sided with them, so we can do what we could under our power. We should try to look at how a democratic and open legislature should work and how the rules of procedure should be devised to tie in with this objective. It's not like what the pro-establishment camp think, that they would amend the rules so that the government motions and bills can be passed without hindrance. I move amendments to 3 rules. I want to promote the independence and democratic value of this council so that this council is a better legislature for it. I understand the pro-establishment camp would oppose to these amendments because that would stand in the way of the stated purpose of clearing away the obstacles to government motions and bills. This council should uphold our independence in dealing with our business. The legislature should be independent of the executive, and it should not be controlled or influenced by the executive. This is about the basic responsibility and role of the legislature, although this is not in the basic law, but in Article 73 on the functions of Leg Code, we understand that apart from legislating work, this council is also responsible for acting as a check and balance. Although the CPG has repeatedly recently the doctrine of separation of powers, but if the legislature is not independent of the executive, it cannot fulfill the responsibility under the basic law to check against, to monitor the work of the government, the executive. And unfortunately, recently, in the discharge of your duties, you have favored the executive. For example, in the appropriation bill discussion, you make rulings in accordance with the basic law. According to ROP, you consulted the government before doing that. And in dealing with members' amendments, you allow the government to have a excessively long time to respond to members' views. And even the government was late by 2 days. You allowed that to proceed, and you only allowed a little bit of time for members to raise questions. Such biased rulings of yours are the reason that we need to amend the rules. This legislature, this council is here to monitor the government, not to work with the government. So we want to remind the president and future presidents that at all times the president should be vigilant about our road. And I hope the pro-establishment camp would understand that these new rules, would lay the foundation for the proper functioning of this council. I see no reason why they should object. As for 79, I want to add a new 79C is about the committees. I want to add this sub-rule in that the public and the media should be able to attend meetings of committees. Notwithstanding Rule 88 for the removal of the public and media, electoral commission meetings and committee on ROP, you would usually convene meetings, closed-door meetings, but the relevant meetings should conduct meetings, and such meetings should be open to the public unless 2/3 of the members agree to have closed-door meetings. So the general principle is that all meetings are open to the public. I want to promote an open meeting culture. This is the international trend. According to the international monitoring organizations, all meetings of a legislature should be open to the public. I want to incorporate this in the rules of procedure to ensure that all meetings are open to the public. I understand this. It would not be appropriate to have open meetings all the time. So we can allow some meetings to be held behind closed doors in accordance with practice. And I want to introduce a mechanism for the committee to decide on having closed-door meetings, but a high threshold of members' consent should be required. I'm not introducing drastic changes. I just want to enshrine this important principle in black and white in the ROP. I understand, I think, the pro-establishment camp would agree with us. So I urge them to support the relevant resolution. If the first amendment is about our autonomy and independence, the second one is about opening up meetings, the third one is really about democracy. It's about Rule 92, where there are no rules in the ROP making certain requirements. And that is to say that where there are no rules on certain matters, it would be up to the presidents who would decide, having regard to the practice of other legislature and the circumstances. And I would like to add that the president should consult the Committee on Rules of Procedure, and also that is to say he should look at both the convention and practices of other legislature and consult the Committee on ROP as well, so that the president would be getting more support, and it would act as a check against abuse of rules, because we are talking about business which has never been encountered. if the president is to consult another body, it would be conducive to the president's ruling, which will be appropriate. And I believe the Committee on ROP would be in the best position to assist the president, and that the president in the future, in exercising power under this rule, will have something to go by. This will also afford protection and safeguard to presidents for doing the proper thing. For these three amendments, there are no major principles which go against the interests or political philosophy of the pro-establishment camp. So please don't object to the amendments just because they are moved by a pan-democratic legislator. Well, we are legislator for a limited duration, but this council would be here forever. We would like the council to make progresses all the time so that it remains an appropriate institution in the 21st century. I hope that you will not oppose to those amendments just because they are moved by members on this side. I hope members can set aside political differences and seriously consider our proposals. And in the remaining time, I would like to say something about Mr. Paul Chair's remarks.
The chairman of the CROP mentioned ROP 20, and that is to reduce the number of persons standing up to make a petition or to increase from 20 to 35. Mr. Paul Chair has very impressive debating techniques, and he packaged it in such a nice way to explain that 20 should be increased to 35. However, I'd like to tell you that this is just a screen for what they are talking about. Actually, petition is the second best tool. From 2012 to 2016, in the last term of the Legislative Council, there was no occasion on which we could set up an inquiry committee using the LegCo PNP ordinance. No matter how serious the situation was, the pro-establishment camp vetoed it. And that is why we had no choice but to go for the second best, and we went for the setting up of a select committee using a petition. Is that the perfect way to inquire into matters? Of course not. Every time we would have hoped that the pro-establishment camp would set aside political differences and subscribe to our views so we can set up a select committee using PNP. But in the last term of LegCo for 5 years, every time they refused to do it. Mr. President, if we are in a fair and totally open political atmosphere, I'm sure pro-establishment members would also agree to using PNP. But then we are now resorting to the last tool in order to help Hong Kong people inquire into matters. But now the pro-establishment camp would also like to take away that tool. If the number is increased from 20 to 35, it would be impossible for the pro-establishment camp to conduct any inquiry, and then the objective impact on Hong Kong would be totally negative. And that is, the public may have suspicions against the powers that be and maybe against the rich and powerful, but then they would not be able to conduct any inquiries. And what is most tragic is that the chairman, Mr. Paul Chair, also heads the inquiry of the UGL incident, and yet he is now defending the raising of the threshold for setting up a select committee using a petition. What is the justification? Raising the threshold from 20 to 35. Why not 40? Why not lower it to 30 or 28? The pro-establishment camp never told us why. At the same time, the committee stage membership would now be reduced from 35 to 20. Why are they moving these figures around? What is the objective impact? The pro-establishment camp does not want to monitor the executive, and also they do not want to sit through the committee stage. This is the objective effect. This is what the pro-establishment camp is doing behind the amendments to the ROP. Facing this 21st century Hong Kong legislature, we should not regard ourselves to be sojourners. We, of course, will not be here forever. So what kind of system do we want for the legislature? This is my biggest worry. And here I'd like to refer to ROP 40(1) to adjourn this debate immediately. Since Mr. Alvin YEUNG has raised a motion to adjourn the debate, this Council will first deal with this motion. Mr. Alvin YEUNG, please speak on the motion. Thank you, Madam Deputy.